All right.
Alrighty. What do you got for us?
Well, I have another semiconductor stock for you. I know that we're talking that for Fast Market today, but I feel like the semi stocks are Intel. I should say Intel. We're talking Intel. But I feel like the semiconductor stocks are a little bit different than what we normally hit on for this segment. I mean, unlike, I don't go out and really buy a product from Intel or these semi companies, even though I most likely interact with them every day via my desktop computer or my smartphone. So I'm wondering, Landon, is it a little bit different for a company like Intel with your data? How do you really analyze that social sentiment?
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's a great point. So Intel's kind of has sort of two business, right? They've got their consumer-facing side, which is more along the lines of computer products and focus on gaming and modems and things like that. And then their data side, which is more cloud computing and enterprise deals and things like that. Of those two, we can really only offer insight on the consumer-facing one. So that's a big caveat with LikeFolio data. We're only talking about when people are talking about buying products that have Intel in them. And so that's usually gamers or people looking for high performance PCs. And so with that caveat said, I will say that our data has done an extremely good job of predicting revenue and stock price over the course of the history for Intel. And one thing that we're noticing, on this show, we normally talk about companies that are reporting tomorrow or today after the bell. This one is not reporting until I think the end of July sometime. Their quarter hasn't quite ended yet. So Intel's quarter is ending at the end of June, and what we're seeing is, if you notice that last bar on this quarterly chart, that is the pace of the current quarter, and the quarter is almost over. It's got about 2 weeks left, and we're seeing that it is doing really well compared to last quarter, up on year-over-year, on a year-over-year basis. And what's really interesting is the last quarter for Intel was very bad. They had a big miss, and our data was lower on it. And so what's interesting is you've got some maybe expectation momentum to the downside where people think that Intel is starting to struggle. And so if this quarter ends up being a beat, which our data is suggesting that it may, then this could be a little bit of a surprise to the street coming off the really bad report last quarter.
Landon, we were just discussing before we came on the air, Intel, you can look down at your computer and you see your little Intel sticker, right, on both of our computers here. That being said, with this big sell-off, is this indicative of like AMD starting to eat Intel's lunch here? Is this competition kind of catching up to Intel finally, or is this just a bad quarter for everybody?
So, what we're seeing is that for Intel, it's a lot around the data side, the data-centric side, which is what we don't track. They had a very bad quarter of that last quarter. However, the consumer side was also off, and so it was kind of a bad scenario for them because both sectors or both portions of their business were doing poorly. And that, you mentioned the sell-off. They haven't really participated in the market's rally over the last year or so. The stock's pretty flat, which is not, it's not super surprising when you've got Intel. I think the beta on that stock is maybe 0.6, so maybe it's not going to always participate as much. But still, it's really sold off since I think it was up around 60 just before they reported their last earnings, and now it's trading 46, 47. So it's off quite a bit. And like I said, the expectations could be that this company is starting to struggle, but our data is showing that the current quarter is really strong year over year. So I think there could be a little bit of a surprise in the end of July.
Yeah, and Landon, I mean, I think the CEO of Intel actually came out and had like a pretty poor 5-year outlook, also pushing that down. But you mentioned the data centers. I know NVIDIA is big in that space. Of course, we know what's happened in NVIDIA. So I think that all reflects, along the lines of exactly what you're saying. Looking at something like an Intel, though, when you do see this data and we're not quite all the way through the quarter yet, are you guys extrapolating that time out if it were all to continue at this pace? Or is this just simply where we are so far through the quarter?
So that's a great question. That bar on the far right is the pace of the current quarter. We have no reason to think that the next 2 weeks are going to be extra special or unusual in any way. So it's not a scenario where, this is Q4 for a retailer and we don't have Christmas in yet. That would be a very different scenario, obviously. But so that is the current quarter's pace, and we expect that bar to basically end where it is right now, being up a little bit year over year, which following last quarter's really bad year-over-year numbers, again, I think could be a surprise.
So since Intel is reporting a little bit later on in this quarter, it's given a lot of investors a chance to see what other competing stocks or what other stocks in the same space and how they perform. In fact, this tweet mentions that from Thomas Pace, who says, well, hope the bulls keep buying because as previously stated, there will be no second half rebound. Chip companies reporting very bad news here. Don't take my word for it, read for yourself. Micron, Intel, Nvidia, shoes to drop. And he's referencing a report that Seeking Alpha had online that talked about all of these data points that these companies reported as not being the best for their guidance and also for their earnings.
Yeah, when we're looking at something like this, Landon, I mean, this basically just goes with the sentiment of what you're saying. But when expectations are so low for some of these companies, and then you see the divergence in your data, do you guys see that as a potential, pretty strong opportunity?
Absolutely, yeah. I love tweets like this. I love reports like this. And anytime that market expectations are being lowered, when we're seeing data coming in fairly decent, I mean, it's not a breakout quarter by any means, but it's definitely a snap in the downtrend that we have been seeing. So we love anytime that there is negative sentiment going into a stock where we're seeing strength. That's the divergence we're looking for. We'll probably wait till the end of the quarter before we, make any moves on it, but so far so good.
So where some other negative sentiment might be coming from as well would be the tariff troubles, right, between the U.S. and China. And our next tweet says global semiconductor sales are down 14.6% year over year in April. Since its peak in October, it is down 23.7%. Given re-escalation of trade tensions between U.S.-China in May, we haven't seen the bottom yet. Given strong correlation with Asia exports, more weakness to come. Is this also good for you, Landon? You like seeing more of this?
I love it. Absolutely. Lower those expectations. And again, I got to put huge caveat. We track about 60% of Intel because that's how much consumer facing we can do. Obviously, people aren't talking about their enterprise deals on Twitter. They're not mentioning those. And so we can only look into about, I think it's about 60% of the value of Intel is their consumer facing side. But it's looking good. And I think it could be a surprise, especially if things like this keep coming out. So love it. The only thing again, one more caveat, China stuff, we have no insight into. So that's a big question mark, big asterisk on this.
Intel's earnings July 25th after the close, for the record.
And that is a verified earnings date too. We got that on the Thinkorswim calendar under Market Watch. But Landon, we're going to leave it here just to kind of sum up what you're saying, though. As long as there's no huge surprise in terms of any type of a change in terms of your data, you expect it to kind of chug along at this pace. And if that's the case, you like the setup going into this earnings announcement as a potential surprise to the upside, just simply because expectations are so down in the dumps.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's not a huge breakout quarter for us. It is up year over year, where the last quarter was down significantly year over year. So that snap is what we're looking at, and the stock's sold off. So expectations are much lower. So we really like this. There's a long way to go, of course, until earnings, but purchase intent. I looked at the line today. This is a bar chart, but I looked at the line graph today, and it's on its way up as well. So the quarter may end up even higher than it is now. So we're excited about this trade. But we may wait a while before we put it on.
Yeah, a little different as we're looking ahead, but really, really great stuff, Landon. And as you said, a little bit of a caveat because some of the enterprise stuff, but as you've said in the past, it's been pretty good in terms of the accuracy and looking at these names. But we'll leave it there. Thanks for joining us this morning.